From limos to buses and all of the haunted or cursed cars in between, don't text and drive, and don't haunt and drive. Let's dive right into the top 10 cursed cars that took control. Starting off this list, in our number 10 spot we have the Death Limo. Okay, this car is not only apparently haunted, but it's a huge part of history as well. So the Graf and Stift Death Limo was the one that Austrian Archduke Franz Ferdinand was in with his wife when it stalled outside of a cafe for seemingly no reason. It was here that the pair were killed, which is one of the events that really triggered the start of the First World War. This would already be quite the story, but things only continued on for this haunted car. Throughout the next 12 years, there are said to have been 13 more deaths that were attributed to the car. One man went crazy while driving the car, there was a military police officer who crashed it with other people in the car, there was another owner who also crashed it, just a lot of horrible things happening around one single car. The vehicle now sits in the War History Museum in Vienna. Now here's the thing, you, like I am right now, would likely be thinking, after all of those accidents the car should be absolutely totaled, right? Apparently it's not, and this is just another thing that adds to the mystery surrounding it. In our number 9 spot today we have the 1937 Cord 810 Worcester. This car was initially stored away for a long 75 years before, in 2017, it was brought out again. The car was hidden away for so long because it was initially built specifically for a Louisiana senator who wanted a car that had some armor in order to protect him. Unfortunately, however, this senator was shot and killed before he was ever even able to use it. From there, the ownership was passed on to a naval officer, but he too would go on to meet an untimely fate in the Second World War, and this happened again before he was able to get behind the wheel of a car, which is a really eerie connection. Because of this dark and seemingly coincidental history, many people have been questioning whether this car should have ever been taken out of storage. Maybe this is just one car that wasn't meant to be driven. In our number 8 spot today we have Elvis's Cadillac. Elvis was known as the king of rock and roll, and he was also known for his lavish red Cadillac. Since his passing, the car hasn't been seen very much except for those who have apparently seen the ghost version of it. Apparently many people have reported seeing quite a talented Elvis impersonator driving a red Cadillac through the area, only to realize that this is not the case at all when it suddenly disappears through a wall. At least this one isn't leaving people with creepy feelings or simulating accidents that scare people. Maybe the king of rock just wanted to go for a cruise sometimes. If you ever take a trip to Graceland, keep your eyes peeled for the phantom red Cadillac. In our number 7 spot today we have Bus 375. This story takes place on a bus referred to as the Midnight Bus or the Bus of Fragrant Hills because that's where it was headed to on its route. On midnight of November 14th, 1995, the final bus of the night pulled into the bus terminal. This bus would go on to mysteriously disappear, but before it did, some strange things occurred. Before the bus left the terminal, 2 passengers got on the bus. One was a young man and one was an older man. The bus departed and headed on its route, but while headed to one of the last stops, the driver saw 3 shadowy figures waving at the side of the road, so the driver pulled over so that he could pick them up. As he pulled over, the driver just got this strange feeling, as if something wasn't quite right. His instincts were kicking in, and he couldn't see their faces at all, but he decided to ignore these feelings and he let them on the bus. Shortly after these 3 people got on the bus, the old man picked a fight with the young man, claiming that he had stolen his wallet. Things escalated to a point where both men were kicked off of the bus and only the driver and the 3 figures were left on as they sped away. Once off the bus, the old man explained to the young man that he likely just saved their lives because those 3 figures were actually ghosts. He had noticed that he couldn't see their feet and that they were floating. The following day, the 2 men would learn that bus 375 had vanished, and just 3 days later would be found at the bottom of a lake. Inside the bus, they found 3 decomposed corpses. What exactly happened on that bus after the 2 men got off remains an unsolved mystery. In our number 6 spot today we have the van. Dr. Kevorkian was a man who was called an angel of death. If you haven't heard of these people before, they are doctors who like to euthanize patients, normally against their will. So this piece of work was doing just that, and one of his most important tools was his large white van. Yeah, huge red flag already. The van later went on to have the nickname the Deathmobile, and it made headlines again when it found its way into a pawn shop. The reason the person who had previously had it didn't want it anymore is because they claimed that there were strange occurrences that began happening once it was in their possession. This story led to paranormal investigator and ghost hunter Zach Bagan purchasing it. Apparently people who who enter the van immediately feel just overwhelming sadness, and they also feel like there are unseen eyes that are watching them at all times. I don't know why you'd want the van of a serial killer, it just seems weird, to be honest. In our number 5 spot today we have bus number 7. I don't know what it is with haunted buses, but this one takes place in the 1930s in London. One night a man was driving on an empty street, but all of a sudden, out of nowhere, when he reached the intersection of Cambridge Gardens and Ladbroke Grove, a double-decker bus just appeared out of thin air right in front of him. He swerved to avoid the bus, but unfortunately ended up crashing into a tree. When authorities later went to check to see what bus was on that route at that time, they came to find that there was in fact no bus scheduled in the entire area. There were even some people who witnessed the crash and say that the red bus vanished after the accident. Over the following decades after this incident, there were more accidents and even some fatalities with a very similar story. A red bus with all of its lights on, but no one on it. Not even a driver. Eventually authorities decided that something needed to be done, so apparently there was some work done to the area like street widening, extra streetlights to assist with the visibility, and this work took place in the 1990s, and since then there hasn't been any more reports of the number 7 haunted bus. In our number 4 spot today we have the jumping car. So this is a weird car story that comes to us from Cape Town, South Africa in 2004. Basically one night a family here who owned a Renault Megane were inside their home when they heard their car start up. Of course, they probably thought that someone was trying to steal it, but when they looked in the car, no one was there. They decided the best thing to do would be to follow up on it, so they ended up calling the police to come and investigate. When the police got there, they weren't quite sure what to do with the story until, right in front of their own eyes, they watched the car with no one inside start up completely on its own and proceed to plow right into a tree. After this crash, they investigated further and found out that the handbrake had been engaged. They of course contacted the car's manufacturer, who had said that perhaps the car may have had a faulty or rusty starter, and while that is definitely quite a reasonable explanation, it fails to cover how this car seemed to hit the throttle all on its own. This is exactly why people believe that this car may have actually been haunted. In our number 3 spot today we have the F1 car. Back in 2018, during the F1 season, driver Daniel Ricciardo expressed his frustrations during a press conference, saying that he was sure his car was under a curse. This seems like a frustrated driver just expressing that, but it might have been something more. His Red Bull F1 car had an awesome preseason run, and there were strong performances in those early trials. Even at the beginning of the season, he was able to land himself 2 wins. That's a great track record, but after his win in Monaco, things started to change. His F1 car abruptly started to have issues, so much so that it caused him to have to stop early in 8 different races. That's quite a significant amount, especially considering how well he was doing. In the end, maybe this was just a stroke of bad luck, or maybe something more sinister was at bay. In our number 2 spot today we have the Black Volga. This story of the Black Volga starts off when it was realized that this limousine was found to be linked to multiple disappearances over the years. The incidents occurred in the 60s and 70s in Ukraine, and the stories are weird. Basically, the most well-known story pertaining to the vehicle says that one day, 2 girls approached the limo and were suddenly sucked inside. A witness saw this happen and went up to the car, but there were no signs of the people he had just seen. Suddenly, this witness saw flashes of white lights, and suddenly they found themselves waking up several days later with a pounding headache. Apparently, other people have come forward with similar stories, but no one can quite figure out what is behind this mystery. Some people even think that the Black Volga is driven by Satan himself. In our number 1 spot today we have JFK's Lincoln. Former United States President John F. Kennedy met an ill fate when he was assassinated during a visit to Dallas, Texas in 1963. On that fateful day, the then president was traveling in a motorcade in his Lincoln SSX 100. Because this is such a historical moment, the car of course wasn't used after that, and instead was part of the investigations before being turned over to the Henry Ford Museum in Michigan. It is here where people have reported some spooky happenings around the Lincoln. Many visitors have reported seeing a man in gray standing near the car, sort of like a shadowy figure that is keeping watch. It is also said that the most common time to see the gray man is during the month of November. This is quite peculiar considering the fact that JFK was actually killed on November 22nd. Could this be a coincidence, or is this the ghost of the former president? Alright guys, that has been our list for today. Thanks so much for checking it out. I've been your host today, Olivia Kozlowski, and I'll see you again soon. Bye. Alright, cursed cars, buddy. And don't drive these cars. Uh-oh. Imagine that's the intro. Don't drive these cars. That's so funny. That's a hilarious title. Was the one that the Austrian Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife. What the So the graph and stift. Okay, we're starting this sentence over again.